Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion this afternoon. I'm Kevin Ochsner, and glad to be with you from Colorado. We're happy to have Specialty Insurance and Joplin Regional Stockyards as our sponsor this afternoon to have a conversation about a topic that I think is pretty timely and important to all of us. And so as I get started, let's just tie into it. I wanted to introduce myself, and then we'll introduce our panelists. I make my home in Kersey, Colorado, about 60 miles northeast of Denver. A lot of people may know me best as the guy on Cattleman and Cattleman TV show on RFD TV, a weekly show. But in reality, I've spent 30 years doing some other things. Number one, I've been in the consulting business in agriculture, had an opportunity to consult with a lot of agricultural companies, both in the animal and crop world. In addition to that, most proud of my family, 2 daughters and a son, and my beautiful wife, Julie. And then in addition to that, I run a set of about 200 head of registered limousine Limflex cows, and keep myself busy and planted in the beef cattle business. I tell people that while I wear many hats, the beef business in my blood. And believe it or not, that is our family coat of arms. There's a black bull rising from it. The name Ochsner, and in German it's spelled with or pronounced with a big ox. Ochsner is means German for ox, and here's what my wife and I argue about. It is suggested that the original bearer of the name Ochsner was named Ochsner because it was one who kept and sold cattle, or one who was as stubborn as an ox. My wife thinks it's the stubborn as an ox. I said it's because pastoral scene and sunshine and green grasses ahead for the beef cattle industry. And then there's some folks that I visit with that said, Kevin, it's a little foggy. I can see 6 months down the road, but I really can't see much further than that, and hard to see what's around the bend. This is the picture that I think best describes the future of the business. There's some winding roads, some turns, and some curves, like you guys have in Missouri here. This boy that is used to growing up in this 1 mile by 1 mile square roads, and then Kevin takes me through the hills and hollers getting here from Carthage, Missouri. I'm not quite used to your curves and your bends in the road. Let me tee up for our discussion today at least 4 turns of the road, and I know our panelists are going to not only talk about these but a couple of others. There are some turns of the road that we're going to have to navigate, and in my opinion, one of them clearly is weather conditions that we've all dealt with, right? I was telling these guys earlier, I took some of my cows, not last summer, summer before, to the Sandhills of Nebraska because I was so worried about the drought. I was wanting to loosen up on pastures that year, kept some cows at home and took some cows and all my replacement heifers out there, only to come into last year and have a big old drought. Like many of you, I tried to put up as much hay as I possibly could last year. We've got some irrigated ground, and we put up as much hay as we possibly could, but instead of selling alfalfa for $400 a ton, I was feeding that stuff to my cows. I'm not certain how smart or not smart that was, but clearly our future hinges on this weather forecast. And I thought it was interesting because as of May 5th, Western United States, as we look through New Mexico and Arizona and Texas and parts of Oklahoma and so forth. But then we roll on to May 12th and look at the rain that some of us got. Some of the very same places, right, would suggest that, hey, we in Colorado, at least my neck of the woods, we got 4.5 inches over 3 days. That doesn't happen much to us. And I know this rain that you guys just got was an absolute godsend and a huge blessing. But the question is, the long-term forecast still remains, and it's hard to know. You know, did this break through, and are we gonna have a wet couple of months, or was this kind of one-time event, and we're gonna look more like that through July? And that's a real question mark for me. Second thing, obviously, is feed and forage availability, and I touched on that before. But it's not unimportant to talk about the fact that last year we had the absolute lowest hay stocks since 1959, and the fact of the matter is, I'm sorry, smallest since 1954, I should say. Hay production was the lowest since 1959. And you and I both know that going through the winter we went through, I know some of you had a little better winter than some of us up north, but there are a lot of people that I talked to through Nebraska and the Dakotas that thought they had plenty of hay to get them through, and they ended up having to buy extra hay for the year. So yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen this little picture on Facebook, but that's pretty apropos. Everybody's posting vacation pics, and I'm like, there's my ski trip eating my Caribbean cruise, you know. So anybody had to buy hay this year understands the price of that product. And $64 million question is, are we going to move into a year that we're going to have more availability of some feed and forage? Cattle and beef supply, if you've been to any cattle meeting, you've heard this story, right? Lowest cow number since 1962. There is a correlation between drought and cow numbers. We all know that, and particularly when more than half the cows are in states that were impacted by drought the last couple of years. We've been slaughtering a lot of heifers, right? I mean, the reality is 39% of the fed cattle were heifers last year. And my understanding, we're dropping that a bit. But the point is that this is going to take a little while to rebuild. And if you look at projections, Cattle Facts provided earlier this year, and you see that we're going to bottom out probably around 28.8, maybe 28.5 million cows. That's a lot different from 33 or 34 million cows in this country. And certainly I talked to a lot of people. Those of you may be involved in this business too. That the dairy herd is taking up part of the slack. Clearly, we're seeing more beef on dairy calves, and those cattle are coming into the system. But I don't think they're going to take up all this slack. There's always been a herd of 9 million dairy cows, and there's always been those calves that have come to the market. Now, historically, maybe they've been 100% Holstein or Jersey. We're putting more beef on the market, but we didn't manufacture more dairy cows than we had 10 years ago. So I don't think that is nirvana. That's not going to change the beef supply. And in terms of beef production, they suggest our day in the sun. And the last thing I wanted to tee up is consumer demand. And here's the good news. I think, let's not forget, COVID, I think, ended up showing people how to cook at home again. I think that was fantastic. I think a lot of people actually got access to better beef than they'd ever eaten before. They figured out that they could take a good steak, bring it home, put it on their grill, and they could have 2 meals of steak a week instead of going out and having 1 meal of steak, just by the cost savings that they saved, right? The good news is 98% of the households purchase meat. 3/4 of them say, you know what, we are a meat eater. We hear a lot about people that want to eat, vegetarians and vegans and flexitarians, but the reality is still 3/4 of U.S. population say we're meat eaters, and most importantly, 3/4 say meat is an important part of the diet. So I think we've made incredible progress. I, for one, am a big beef checkoff supporter. I believe the checkoff has done wonderful work in trying to build beef demand and helping reacquaint people with the nutrient value of beef, that says beef is not this big bad killer that people like to say here about 10 years ago. Now, on the other side, people are genuinely exploring strategies to try to save money at the meat counter. And you see this, 42% saying, hey, only buying what we need, 35% saying we need to look for coupons and what's on sale. 35% say we're going to stock up, figure out how to freeze this product when it's on sale. And another 17% say we're still going to buy meat. And maybe a year ago we were buying all natural, organic, grass-fed, and we're like, as expensive as meat is right now, we're just going to roll down. We're still going to buy meat, but maybe we're not going to buy some of the higher end stuff. So I think it's reasonable and realistic to assume that the economy is a little different than it was 3 or 4 years ago, and people are feeling the hit. The hit. I had one anecdotal experience I wanted to share. We do at our church once a year, it's a Farmer Blessing Sunday in April. It's a pretty cool event. And some of the farmers bring their big equipment in, people crawl all over it and so forth. And my wife and I have beef business, and there was the church asked us, hey, would you put together a gift basket of beef because we wanted to raffle it off to somebody. We raffled it off to this young family with 2 children, I think 3 and 4 or 5, and they were so grateful for it. They said, we just don't eat beef. We can't afford it. This is the first beef we've eaten, and we gave them hamburger and steaks, and they were going to have steaks for Mother's Day. But it made me very aware of the fact that there are citizens in the public out there that like our product, but frankly, when it gets as expensive as it's gotten, we are going to ration some demand in this process. So the point is, those are 4 areas that I think at least have impact on where this cattle and beef business is going. And as we talk about that, there are some bends in the road, but I like this quote: a bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. We're all adjusting. I've had some people tell me, say, Kevin, we went through this last drought and we restocked, but interest was a little cheaper then than it is today. And that's a bend in the road, right? But the bend in the road's not the end of the road unless we fail to make the turn. And I like this one even better. Colin McCrae, I'm not a huge race car fan, but he said it best. He said, straight roads are for fast cars, turns are for fast drivers. And here's my point. We need to be fast drivers. We need to be able to navigate the turns. We need to be able to anticipate the turns. And I'm excited to say we have 3 gentlemen with us today that are going to give us some insights into some of those turns and some tools to help us navigate some of those turns in the road so that the bend in the road isn't the end of the road. And particularly as it relates to risk management, I think one thing we have to recognize as beef cattle producers, if we've not learned anything over the last couple of years, we've learned that a black swan event can totally turn our world upside down in a 24-hour news cycle. So shame on us if we are not getting the information, the insight, using the tools at our disposal to do as good a job as we possibly can in navigating those turns in the road. With that, we're going to tie into the panel. And with us, first of all, I'm pleased to introduce a gentleman who's founder and president of Sidwell Strategies in a number of entrepreneurial pursuits in the agriculture, grain, seed, transportation, distribution, meat business, and many others. He's recently also appointed to the board of directors of Kansas City Federal Reserve, Oklahoma City branch, so I do have some interest rate questions for you today. And prior to his recent transition into becoming more of an entrepreneur himself, he was the vice president of global strategy, mergers, and acquisitions for OSI Group. He was based out of Chicago and worked a lot in the mergers and acquisitions business. He also served as head of food and agribusiness research advisory for Rabobank in Northeast Asia and has quite some stories, having been on lots of television shows, Bloomberg and CNBC, and a number of them that are just a little more popular than Cattleman, maybe more well watched. I don't know. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Oklahoma State University and a Master's of Economics degree from the University of Hong Kong. He himself is a farm boy from Oklahoma, and his wife and his son live in Oklahoma, Gulf, Oklahoma today. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Brady Sidwell. Thanks for joining us today,
All right,
Brady.
thank you. Appreciate it.
It's great to be here. I drove up this morning from Enid in Enid, Oklahoma. It's nice to see green kind of all the way here. The Kansas crop tour just finished, and I thought, man, this wheat looks pretty good around here. But I guess we are in eastern Kansas, right? So western part of the state is a little bit different, of course, and that's our area. But again, back to the weather. I think I heard some people saying that I look younger than I did at that time, so I appreciate that. I've just got a kind of a few slides here to set the basis as we've already seen, and I guess we start with the good news first, right? That we have had some rain. But it's a significant challenge. I mean, we've got a lot of people in our area, producers that planted spring oats. Of course, we're baling wheat hay now if we can, and you always get caught in the rain as soon as you start baling, it seems. But hey, we'll take the rain. Sorghum Sudan is going to be a big deal this year, and we're just not out of the woods yet in terms of rebuilding and having enough forage stocks to get by. So still some challenges ahead, and this is kind of one of my favorite things to look at. But I was looking at that. I don't remember $8 hay ever. In fact, I remember $2 diesel. But our inputs are increasing, and we talk a little bit about inflation, and I know we will more. But that's always the biggest variable. People say we've got high-priced cattle, we've got high-priced commodities and things we're selling, but does the farmer get to keep it? Typically not, right? And it's because we're price takers, and a lot of things we buy retail for our inputs. And when it comes to fuel and chemical and fertilizer and all those other things, it really take away our margin pretty quick. So I've had the opportunity to be on the serve as a board member, and I don't directly
impact interest rates.
Yeah, I provide the agriculture and rural area inputs to the Fed at the Oklahoma City branch, the KC Fed. It's been great to be a part of that for the last 3 years, which has been an interesting time in the economy with COVID and everything. But interest rates are inflation is coming down. We've seen that, but it is far from over, I think. It's become a real cost in our operations because we've had 10 consecutive hikes by the Fed. The next one's coming up in the middle of June. They've talked about a pause, of course, that we're not going to see higher rates. But I just can't say that with all the supply chain things going on and geopolitical supply chain issues overseas that we're completely done, and that inflation is going to just be on a downward trend. But we talked about that, of course, in the food side. Prices and thankfully beef actually hasn't been one of the faster price increases due to bird flu and things like that we've seen in some of these other protein markets. We've seen some price escalation in there, but the outlook is, like you said, it's a windy road. There's a lot of uncertainty that consumers have. I feel like the economy is still strong, but as you guys all know when you watch the evening news and politics here in this country and internationally, that there's a lot of things that could wreck this market pretty quick ultimately, and we've just got to be cautious of that. That's probably my number one thing to think about is higher prices unfortunately cure higher prices. So just a matter of time of when that's going to happen. I put a few just kind of threads down here of inflation has come down, but we could see this uptrend resuming. Accelerated China economic recovery. They had a lockdown. They're opened back up. They're trying to be much more of a world player in this all the geopolitical items that are happening, especially Russia and Ukraine. And if this economic recovery in China does accelerate, if supply chains also become disrupted as much as we depend and the rest of the world depends on China for inputs, the inflation could creep back in simply from that. So it's something we got to watch out for. You can't see it down there, but a stronger U.S. dollar is this thing has been all the way up to 115 plus on the index. Now we're back to 103. We had a good kind of sell-off trend that makes our commodities cheaper overseas as the dollar was declining, but now we've had a big rebound here in the last couple of weeks, and that also makes overseas products cheaper when our dollar strengthens. And so that's a headwind for ag commodities, and it's a headwind for beef because even though it may make our export of grain commodities more expensive overseas to keep more here, it also makes beef that we buy into this country a little bit cheaper. And so
The big players, will definitely be looking at that, and as our beef prices increase, and as we maintain a strong U.S. dollar, that can also increase beef imports, which is a challenge. So, we talk about the black swan events, right? Everybody's wondering. We've had the most predicted recession, I think, in history. We've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it, and we're tired of talking about it. It's like, let's get this recession behind us. Let's get it over with and move on. That's typically when recovery starts. But there's a number of things that can create economic instability: commodity prices, interest rates, consumer confidence level. The stock market has really been very resilient so far, and then of course black swan events. And while there's relationships in all of these things with agriculture and with cattle prices, none of it is necessarily directly related. So we've seen a lot of that in our markets, in the grain markets and the cattle markets. Is sometimes what really wrecks our market prices is not directly related to agriculture. It comes as a headwind from the outside. And there's so much going on in the world right now, and a lot of crosswinds that don't necessarily lead us all in the same direction. That we've got to be cautious of this, and animal health issues and whatnot. The USDA did just come out with per capita beef consumption. It's hard to predict prices, right? But what about availability in terms of beef production declining and the amount of beef that is available to consumers in the U.S.? And you can see the USDA, this is going out to next year, has just significantly reduced because of beef production declines with the obvious fundamentals and then strong demand. So we know that's going to mean higher pricing, and this consumer rationing of beef with less available is going to be an issue. Exports. China seems to be a part of every conversation that we have, and it's become a more recent factor in the U.S. beef market. And I spent 10 years in China and all over Asia. Obviously, it's a very important consumer, but it's a very tricky trade partner as well. And I think that's becoming even more so. But I was based in Hong Kong for a number of years, and a lot of the beef we've been exporting U.S. beef to China for many years, just not through the front door. We've been shipping it into Hong Kong and Vietnam, and then it makes its way across the border. Well, that has just changed really in the last couple of years. And we talk about Japan and South Korea and how important of a buyer they are for U.S. beef and U.S. pork. And you can see here, China is really as important as some of these other markets that have been around for all these years. The Chinese consumers, if they have a preference for beef, it is grain-finished marbled beef. And I say that because they love fat content. They eat dark meat chicken. They love fatty pork. A lot of what they buy from Australia, New Zealand is grass-finished, and from Brazil is grass-finished. They haven't been able to get the fatty beef, but that's definitely their preference. And so it is a huge market potentially for us. It is today and is going forward, but there's going to be a lot of stops and starts probably to this. But that's why it's all important when we talk about kind of the global situation and related to Russia and South America and the positioning of this important consumer. So we know that a big part of Chinese imports of beef are coming from Brazil. Of course, they just resumed after they had a mad cow case here not long ago. But if I had to summarize anything, just to talk about China, they are looking for alternative trade routes to the U.S. China was a huge importer of corn from Ukraine and made all of these purchases leading up to some of these Black Sea renewals that they thought were not going to go through and escalated tensions in that part of the world. They started buying a lot of U.S. corn, which now what are they doing? They're canceling it, right? And we've seen this corn market kind of plummet here with planning and U.S. weather and other things, but also because China's been canceling a lot of their purchases. And some of that is because I feel like they've started now importing from Brazil. A lot of people don't realize that China did not import, was not allowed from a phytosanitary perspective to import corn from Brazil until just last year. So I think that these alternative trade routes to South America for beef and grain, obviously with Russia that they're beginning to set up. And whenever you see China, negotiating with the country, they've kind of mended relationships now with Australia again after they stopped their barley. Whenever they're doing that, it's because they're trying to shift sourcing from those countries. So anyway, again, a tricky trade partner, but really an important one for the U.S. beef market. Just quickly, we had a cattle on feed report that we have every month. We had it on Friday at 2 p.m. after the close. That cattle market really started taking off Thursday and Friday morning before the cattle on feed report. So I'm not sure who's exactly getting the information prior to the 2 p.m. Any hands out there?
I thought it was you.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe it is. Yeah. It's always easy to talk about it if it is, right? So, but, the cattle market took off. Feeder cattle broke out above that kind of double top we had. And, market kind of leans somewhat bullish at the moment. But again, when are we going to top out? But, cattle on feed report was a little bit neutral versus expectations, but we did see lower placements. And we're going to continue to get into that. I mean, there's fewer cattle that are going to be fed corn. That are going to be out there in these feedlots. And while that tightens supplies, it's also kind of tricky to think about how the corn market is going to react when there's fewer to feed. So, this is a corn chart. That's an input for us in the cattle business. So we don't mind seeing that go down. December corn did close below $5 for the first time in a long time on Friday. It was $4.99 3/4. So there's probably a little bit more weakness, in this market with weather conditions and planting rates well ahead of schedule. The Brazil corn crop is they're talking about some dryness there, and obviously it's a global market, so we got to be paying attention to those other key exporters. But this is going to, of course, help the feeder market. I think that's part of the rally we've had, but for how long? One of the things I always get concerned about when you see these spreads widening between old crop and new crop grains, or even between grains and the cattle market, is we get a time where it becomes a little bit too wide, and we see some liquidation in the market. So those are other things we got to worry about. The funds are extremely long in the feeder market. They're long in the live cattle market, and so things can trigger to move in the opposite direction. But for right now, this corn market has been favorable to feeders. And I think we're going to get to a point here probably in the next several weeks that if you're a buyer of corn, it will be a good time to start covering some of your exposure going out in the next several months. June, July timeframe, if we get weather disruptions, and depending on how quick the far north of the Corn Belt in the High Plains gets planted, because it's been extremely wet there, we'll probably see some more volatility in this market. And so it's probably going to be a time to cover inputs soon. So I'm going to finish on this slide. In our business, we talk a lot about risk management. We focus on pricing. But as we all know, I'm from a family farm. We have cow-calf. We run stockers, and the grain side too. And, what are your risks? Well, as we know in this business, we got a lot of them, right? I mean, we're more comfortable with risk in the farming and the cattle business than many people are, right? That's what keeps people out, I guess, right? But we got to think about, operator risk. And, unfortunately, I went through this 10 years ago with my dad in our operation. And more recently, about 2 weeks ago, I went through this with a key operator in some of our businesses. And it really makes you think about all the stuff you're doing and you're responsible for. It's not just be careful, but somebody's got to know about this information, right? If you got a lot of cow-calf out there and, how they're bred, what they're bred to, and something happens to you, God forbid it's a tragic loss, but if you're out of commission for a while, who's going to take over your operation and not just have to liquidate it? So it's something you really need to think about. We're starting to use a lot more technology. I know that, we all like to have our little black book of cattle numbers and everything, but there's apps like AgriWeb out there that we're starting to use that locate your cattle and keeps all your information in one spot, and you can share it with other people, with your spouse, with your kids, even if they're not operating there, with your accountants and others. And I just wanted to share, because I've been through now a couple times of this, and while we think about price risk being so important, and it is, don't get me wrong, but operator and just having others that know about some things, at least about your operation, to be able to carry it on if something unfortunately does happen to you. So
All right. Well, with that,
Absolutely.
I will turn it over.
Fantastic. So what I would challenge you to do, we are going to give you an opportunity to ask questions to each one of these gentlemen in just a few minutes. So be thinking about the right kind of questions you want to ask them. I said right kind of question. This is not an opportunity. I say you're looking for a gotcha question. So he may or may not answer, right? But seriously, be thinking about questions you might have. And at this point in time, happy to introduce a gentleman that probably needs no introduction to this part of the country. Grew up in Mount Vernon, Missouri, of course, together with his dad, Jackie Moore, and Bailey Moore, and brother-in-law, Dustin Eldridge, runs Joplin Stockyards. As many of us know, they market over 500,000 head of cattle a year. I think you said 527,000 last year, and do that on behalf of 10,000 customers. And all of you who are well aware of Joplin knows just how serious they get at making certain that they're creating a market scenario to generate the most money for their customers. Also, not only through the Joplin Regional Stockyards, but some of you may be familiar with primetime video auctions that they also operate as well. They, in addition to that, obviously the family has interest in some stocker calves themselves, owns half of a feed yard in Kansas, and are actively engaged in the entire agricultural business. Skyler himself is married to wife Ashley, have 3 small children, I guess not so small, 9, 7, and a 3-year-old boy. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, would you please help me welcome Skyler to our panel?
Thank you, Kevin. Well, I know most of y'all sit in this room, but I've been in the business my entire life. I went to college for a couple of weeks when I was 18, and decided to go to auctions. It was 8 days. I knew I could make that, so I did. I've been doing it ever since I could walk. That's all I've been involved in. My grandpa had cow calf. My dad, he had cow calf yearlings. I ran around the sale one. I grew up down there in old downtown Joplin, which isn't ideal. I probably want to raise my kids there, but that's where I grew up. So, one thing about the cattle market, and everyone calls me every day wanting to know what the cattle market's going to do. And I'll be honest with you, I wake up and see what Brady says about it. It's just how I do it. These guys study it; they know what's going on. But when it comes to LRPs and keeping your business profitable, I can tell you a few things I do know. I know how much I owe on my farms. I got so many head of cattle, and I know how much I owe the bank. And, I know how much I'm going to have to pay Kevin this year for insurance. I know things like that. It's too high. But anyway, I know things like that. That's just where, that's where I come from. Ever since I was a little boy, my dad's always beating my head. No matter what's going on, you got to protect your equity. And I don't care how old you are. You can be 20 years old and you can just be starting, or you can be 65 years old and, you can still be in the business. But when you go down and sit down with that banker, all you have is your equity. That's all you got in this business. That's all we all ever work for. It don't matter how much work we do, how much we try to get ahead. When we sell them calves, we probably owed somebody for them. That's just the way it is. I don't know how you can change that. That's the way it's been my whole life. If I had this many cattle and I owed the bank this much money, I knew where I was at. I didn't tell him how big they were. I might have told him a couple times they're a little bigger than they were. That's where I was at. It's just the way it is. That's the way we've all operated. But, and I think that's one good thing, going forward from here, I wouldn't have any idea what the market's going to do. You can look at weather, you can look at charts, you can look at whatever you want to when it comes to the cattle market. But are we going to have another COVID? In the coronavirus in the spring of 2020, we were sitting on several yearlings. I think May feeders went to $1.12, didn't they, Brady?
Yep.
$1.12, and June fats went to 77 cents. That was 3 years ago. This spring, 77 cents. June fats today are $1.65 and a half or $6. We're selling fats for $1.70. Had the fundamentals changed that much between then and now? Not a whole lot. We've had packing house fires. We've had the war in Ukraine. We've had all them different things. And, when you're facing all these things, it just comes down to what's your bottom line. About everybody in here knows their expenses. They know if you're buying background calves, you know what you're giving for them. For the most part, you know what your feed's going to cost. If you got a cow calf operation and you're a decent manager at all, you know what it's going to cost to run that cow. You know what you need to have for them calves to build equity, to make your farm payment, to pay your insurance. to keep going, however big or small you are. Those are things that if you don't know, you probably should. But, and that's one thing I like about the LRPs. When it comes right down to it, and I did some a week ago Monday, we've got, if you look out there and all these things, you see all these shortage in cattle and what we're going forward, and cattle numbers are going to be really short. And the futures look great. Some of that's built into the market, right? So what's the index today? 206? The board's 206. The index is $2. If you look at August feeders, which is something that's 60 days away, 235 market for August. The closest thing you can do on a LRP is 13 weeks, which would hit right down in the middle of August, wouldn't it? Yep. So, you look at these things, how much of that's built into the market? And that's what I try to look at. I bought some, everyone always says, well, how can you make these cattle work? You go in there and you're going to give, $1,350 or $1,400 for a 500-pound steer. Well, if you look at a 500-pound steer at $1,400, and you look at an $850-pound steer, and Kevin can sell you an LRP on him, the bottom price you're going to get for him, if you do the highest, is probably $1,900, isn't it?
Yep.
It's pretty close. They'll work. If you got a little grass and the speed's coming down, things like that will work. So, to me, all that, looking forward and doing things like this, it's just about being a good manager. I did some of those heifers for October. I bought some of them heifers weighing 450 pounds, and they cost $1,100 a head. I look like an idiot in there buying them. Anyone that's in there said, well, that's an idiot over there. Look at him, what he's getting for these heifers. But it wasn't very long after that, I called Kevin and I did a 700-pound heifer, and I insured it 209 for October. Well, 209 at 700 pounds, that's $1,470 or $1,800. I got a little grass and contract some feed.
We got someone online wanting to know what LRP stands for and kind of how that works.
That's a Kevin question.
Livestock risk protection.
Livestock risk protection, right? Yeah.
Great question. Thank you for engaging us. You bet.
Yeah. So, you go out there and you buy them LRPs. If your background's cattle, them cattle make $100, $150 a head. As far as my equity position, no matter how bullish I am, if I know I bought this many heifers and I can get $1,460 or $70 for them at 700 pounds for October, I know where my position is going to be after that, after my expenses. And that's the name of the game in this business. Everybody in this business over the years, what equity you built, you paid for your farm. You never had any equity, any extra cash. That's just the way we've always all operated, My grandpa, he raised 6 kids, had 150 acres, or had 150 cows on 500 acres. He raised all 6 of them kids and paid for the 500 acres. He did it all on 150 cows. How he did it, I have no idea, but it was always about what he saved and never was what he made, But I'll never forget in 2014, me and my dad and my brother, we're out there and we got these trucks coming. They're unloading these cattle and we're having a good time. We're making all kinds of money. And he told us, he pulled up there and he kind of sat like this. He pulled up there in his truck and we was out there at that pot dock. We was unloading these cattle. He said, "You boys having fun?" I said, "Yeah, we're having a good time." He said, "Well, I hope, because there's a day coming when you won't be able to get rid of these cattle fast enough." That's all he said. About 6 months later, them same trucks that were unloading them was pulling back in the driveway to get them out of there. It's just the way he thought, it's the way he looked at it. So, LRP is just another tool, but it works really good in a market like this. You got really low cash and you got forecasted, this thing's going to be really good, better than you ever expected. This is no better time than to purchase something like an LRP, because everybody's got all the optimism built into the market. Sure, could October feeders go to 260 or 70? Absolutely. If corn goes to 350 and February fats go to $1.85 or 90, they're going there. But if you've got $1,700 on a steer and you've got $1,480 on a heifer sitting in your pocket, why wouldn't you spend $20 and capture that? It's sitting there for you. If someone bombs the White House tomorrow, they ain't going to bring near that. If a packing house burns down, they ain't going to bring near that. It ain't nothing about anything with the fundamentals of the cattle market. The fundamentals of the cattle market are great. We've got less cattle. It rained yesterday. We can come up with 100 reasons why the cattle market's going to be good, but it just takes one. And it's a sinking ship. They always said the last two people on the Titanic were cattle feeders. One of them looked at the other and said, "What do you think? Think we ought to jump?" And the other one said, "Nah, I think we'll hang on. I think it'll come back." They rode her all the way to the bottom. And that's just the way we all think. We're all optimistic.
Yeah.
We got to be in this business. If you was a pessimist, you would never make it in this business with all the stuff we're up against all the time. So, I think the LRP is just a great tool for you to have. If you're young or whatever you got going on, it's a really good way to capture that equity. And that's really all we have when it comes right down to it. That's all the banker wants to know. That's all anybody wants to know. Where's your equity standpoint? When he emailed us and he said, what do you think the biggest risk facing the cattle business is, And I thought a lot about that, In my day-to-day, I deal with a guy that's got one cow, and I sell cattle to feed yards that have 400,000 cattle. I'm anywhere in between. But, really when it comes right down to it, it's about the young guy, and it's keeping these guys. We sold 527,000 cattle yesterday. 70% of them cattle, of those people that sold those cattle out of those 10,000 customers, have 40 cows or less. That's what makes this business so great. It don't matter if you want to go buy $15,000 bulls and you want to wean your calves for 120 days and you want to send me a story with them when they come to town, I'll read it, and I'm glad to do it. I'm glad you did it. But if you run a bull year-round, you're a teacher at school, and every time you pin 5 or 6 balling bull calves or 4 or 5 heifer calves, you want to bring them down there to me, I'll sell them for you, and I'm glad to do it. And that's what makes this business great. It's all about the freedoms we have in it. It ain't like the hogs or the chickens or anything else, So really the biggest risk we got to watch going forward. And you're seeing some of it out. Some of these people wanting to tell us what to do to these calves, We got to watch it because the biggest thing we have is the freedom to do what we want to do. And we can do it every day. Ain't that right, Joe? You can make a yearling. You can jerk your calves off the cow and you can take them to town. You can guarantee your heifer's open or not, right, Paul? But the thing is, we get to do whatever we want. That is one thing about the cattle business that we need to cherish. And no matter what's going on as a political agenda or anyone's trying to do to us, we got to try to keep that freedom because that's what we all love about this business. We all do it because we love it, and we can do whatever we want to do. If we didn't love it, we sure wouldn't do it. And most of the time, it don't make any money. It's just the way it is. But I think that's one thing that I really wanted to touch on today. You're hearing some of these things coming down the pipeline where, they want to, right, wrong, or indifferent, they want to mandatory ID these kids. They want to do these things like this. And people may get mad at me for saying it, but out of them 527,000 heads, 70% of them cattle, long they got a 40 head or less, and he ain't going to do it. And that's what makes this business what it is. It's them people like that. That's got 30, 40 cows, got a business in town. They wouldn't know if they're making any money or not, but they bring them kids to Joplin, Missouri, we sell them. They put their money back, send their kids to college. They do different things like that. That's what makes this business. It is. And I think we have got to hold on to that no matter what's going on. We've got to keep that in. It's a huge deal to us, and I think it needs to be a big deal to everybody in this business. I really do.
Thank you, Skyler. Well, thank you, Skyler. That ought to give you some things to think about yourselves. And the last panelist is also one of our sponsors from Specialty Insurance, Kevin Charleston. Very accomplished entrepreneur involved in a lot of different businesses, one of which he's the proud owner of Specialty Risk Insurance, a very prominent insurance agency located in Carthage, Missouri. He grew up on his own family's operation, had a meat packing business, understand, ranching operation, and really learned the day-to-day life of agriculture, service to others, and commitment in his youth experience. He attended college on rodeo scholarship, and daughter's involved in that as well. We had an opportunity to spend a little time together last night. Went to both Fort Scott Community College and received his bachelor's degree from Missouri Southern State University. After college, he spent a couple of years working for an insurance company in 2012. Started Specialty Risk Insurance. I need to get that straight. He also founded Livestock Insurance Exchange to provide products for livestock producers feedlots, auctions, livestock haulers, and many others in the livestock business. Specialty insurance risk insurance has grown tremendously and nationwide right now, and it continues to be a very trusted, respected risk advisor for lots of farms and ranches, feedlots, and actually packing and processing facilities as well across the country. In addition to his involvement with specialty risk insurance, he and his wife Trish operate K&T Cattle Company and are very active members of the Carthage community. Again, we appreciate his involvement, his sponsorship here. Kevin, talk to us just a little bit about your business, and we're going to learn a little bit more about livestock risk protection as well, I think.
Thank you. A little hard to follow these three guys from my side of the business, but I've been in the insurance business about 28 years, and one of the opportunities we've had in the last 30 years, and we do a lot of farm and ranch business, we do a lot of feedlot business, a lot of packing business, lots of everything from the dirt to the plate. But this piece of livestock risk protection has been one of the things that we found that we can help and from a different aspect, help our farmers and ranchers maintain. Because we probably insure 1,500 farms, and 70% of those are probably 30 or 40% of those, you're farming with grandpa. And we're trying to manage that so that we can help keep that for our people to work with. We enjoy that opportunity to work with those people. You see technology meets age, and pretty soon Grandpa's got Facebook, and he's keeping up with the markets, and he's getting involved in what's going on. And this product for us really got active about 3 years ago, about 2.5 years ago. We're sitting there talking about livestock risk protection because I was more on the property, the liability, the workers' comp, that side of the business. And this LRP piece, livestock risk protection piece came along for us, and we started talking about it to our customers, and it became an opportunity for us to help maintain some equity, protect some opportunities, things that become ways of life for some people. It's not as big a deal for the guy with 40 cows. But that guy that's got 150 yearlings, it's a pretty big deal. And everywhere we drive in our part of the country, and even out into your part of the country, there's more yearlings than we've ever seen in our part of the country, I believe, than I've ever seen weaned, growing out. And even if they're not weaned, this product, lets us look at the options for whatever size cattle you want. Whether you got one, two, I guess I ought to see it together.
Good picture.
Yeah. 1 to 12,000 in one contract, up to 25,000 for 1 inch. We can work you through that, and it's a pretty unique opportunity because if you want to market half your calves in 1 month against the board, you can do that. If you want to protect half your herd, you can do that. Or if you want to you're going to take your calves a certain month of the year every year, and you know it, and you feel comfortable with it. We'll get into that a little deep in a second. You can mix and match and do whatever you want. You just have to own the cattle whenever you buy the contract on here. It doesn't matter, 1 to 12,000 on that, up to 25,000 again for instance. It steers 600 pounds down, heifer 600 pounds down, steers 600 to 1,000 pounds, 600 to 1,000 pounds on heifer. We basically split that up in the market. I guess I got ahead of myself. We can buy out, like we talked about that, but you can go out there and you can buy these contracts for 13 to 52 months, weeks, and there's 4-week increments all the way out. We can set down. We're kind of getting into August now, and a lot of these cattle, and so the summer calves are kind of slipping away from us a little bit on there, but we'll show you. November's kind of been the one we've taken because in our country, the majority of the cattle come in October and November. The guy with 40 calves, he's weaning those calves, bringing them to town. He's got them weaned maybe a month, depending on what's happened. So that's one of the things that we can have. But you have to own them when you buy the contract, and you have to own them within 60 days of the end of the contract. If you sell them early, not a problem. You just can't sell them more than 60 days early. It voids the contract. And really, nothing more than that. It's not that complicated. I tried to overcomplicate it in the beginning. I'm doing a meeting down in Mountain Grove in Jackson. We started talking about equity. This is the first time in history we've ever had a chance to buy basically a version of crop insurance for cattle. First time in history. We can protect the smallest guy to the biggest guy that wants to take advantage of it. So,
You don't have to sell them either.
if you don't sell them, it doesn't matter. It's up to you how you market your cattle. And I always get this question, well, how do I know? And I need to sell this. I said, if your cattle were worth $20 less than the board when you bought this contract, they're still worth $20 less than the board when you sold it. Don't overcomplicate this. It does though. It does settle out against the CME index, so the 7-day average of feeder cattle is how this thing settles out up to that day. So we had a lot of conversations earlier tonight about, we've had a couple instances come up. We had a foot and mouth deal somewhere in a BSC, kind of a false positive possibly or something. What's that do to the market on Monday? Hard to say. But just say it did move it down $3 or $4 on Monday. It's not going to happen that way. But just say it did. It's a 7-day average, so you don't get killed off on one day on the feeder cattle index, the 12-day average of feeder cattle. It's a 7-day running average. So I'm glad they did that way, because you're not tied to one day. Now, one of the things that we've had trouble talking to people about is the $2 a pound and $2.50 a pound, and we back into this, but it's really total dollars. It doesn't really, it all equates to total dollars to you.
We're
when you
just
take-
10 minutes
when you
away
take money
from the
home at the end of the day. And that's how we
drone
back into this.
demonstration.
We just took a couple
You can
charts.
actually hear about a drone and then
We,
see it go up in the air and do
It's
some
called the state
spraying.
of Missouri.
That's on the
And the
grass
30
area
feet
about
here,
60 yards
It's
south
kind
of
of
the
the average
Ochsner
of the middle of
Center.
the country.
If you're
So
interested, make your
have
way
that
out.
data
That will
readily
start
available.
at
So
2
we've just
p.m.
been following
today.
that. So if you follow the gray line is 2020, the red line is 2012, and you just move over from $863 to $973, and you moved up there to $1,490, all in 1 year. So you gained about $500+ in 1 year. Now, the next year, we're back down to 1,061 and 731. The Titanic guys are over here. They're trying to decide whether to jump over here. So we all don't know where this is. If we did, we all wouldn't be sitting here. That's the one thing we all know. These guys would know it a lot more than I would know. But what I do know is we're within 10 cents of the high right now out there. And that's a November contract on your calf for a 550-pound calf. We're within 10 cents of what it was. I don't know where we're going. It looks pretty good, feels pretty good. One mad cow, foot and mouth. And they load one calf on their own crate and send it to the U.S. And I'm not a doom and gloom guy. I'm an eternal optimist. I always think we're going to get there, where it's going to be okay. But what I've started talking to people about as we got more involved with trying to protect our customers, because it's really important to me that those 1,500 farmers that we sell insurance to keep buying farm insurance. I don't have a job. So it's my job to help them stay here a little more than it's ever been since I've been doing this business for the last 20 years. I don't know where this curve is, but I can tell you, and we'll go into a slide in a minute, I think if you give me $100 to work with over the next 3 years, I think that we can find a solid bottom side to it against this. I don't know where that starts and stops, and I've known Paul a long time, and I'm going to tell him the best thing that ever happened is if you had to pay that $100 in premium, he's going to start squeaking. But I'm going to tell you that means your cattle brought a lot more money. So if you have to pay the premium, it's the best thing that ever happened.
And you don't have to pay the premium until the day you have.
Yeah, and you don't have to pay any premium on this until after that contract expires. Sometimes we mail you a bill, sometimes we mail you a check. We've had a little that both ways lately, haven't we? So,
Sometimes I like to keep the bill better than the check.
yeah, because the cattle brought more. Because the cattle brought more. So that's what we've tried to figure out. And our concept is that if we give you 1 more year from 1490 to 1061, what does that do for you? What if I give you a year and a half of that? That's $800. Now that's a lot of difference to the equity that he's talking about. And I think there's a spot in there that's going to happen. We're our own worst enemy. We're going to overproduce at some point. I'm no economist, but everybody, we're our own worst enemy. We're always going to overproduce. Where and when, we don't know. It's a slower cycle with cattle and hogs or chickens. They can tell you the size of, they can book a chicken right now when they lay the egg, because it's within hours. A hog within 48 hours. You can't do that in this business. So, obviously Brady sells this too, and we talked about it in advance. The opportunity here to save that equity, there's an opportunity here. So this is just an example, and we have this on specialtyrisk.ag. We built an app which you can put it on your phone. It's really more of an icon that lets you look at the prices at 4 o'clock every day. These prices come out at 4 o'clock every day, and I'm going to tell you to already start thinking about 8:25 in the morning. July 1st, it goes 8:25 in the morning, and you cannot buy anything else. The market's locked down till 4 o'clock that day or 3:45, depending on what happens. So start thinking in that way. It's 9 o'clock right now, but just stay with 8:25 because we're going to have some mad people somewhere along the way there in July because they didn't hear that piece of information. RMA just came out with that about 2 weeks ago. So
I was going to be mad.
you were going to be mad. Yeah, yes, exactly. So this is just an example. Take the board right now on 11/16, Kev. I think it's a 26-week contract out there, cut off a little bit, but that's the day that you need to sell your cattle somewhere in that vicinity. Understand that there could be still some volatility in the market within those few days from whenever it settles, but a 7-day running average up to it on feeder cattle. 261 is 99% of that. That's how, I don't know how they came up with this idea, why they didn't just stay with the price on the left, but this is how that's $1,440 for 550 pounds of calf. It's $56 total. The government's going to pay $20. That was 35%. You're going to pay $36 a head. That's my $100 scenario. Give me that for 3 years, somewhere in there, and hopefully you just got to pay the premium. Somewhere in there, it's going to save some market and give you an opportunity to protect yourself. But now, let's say we want to go down there, and you're pretty comfortable down there at $250 on these cattle. That's $1,379. That's $19 a head. Now, I don't know a tank full of diesel, or you buy a soda pop on the way to town every day. Cut a few habits out and buy that for $19 a head. Because we're not going broke and losing all of our equity at $250. That's what we kind of go 10 to 12 back to the market and usually kind of say, hey, this is kind of a pretty good option, especially on a cattle guy. A feeder cattle guy maybe needs to stay tight at $36, depending on what you bought them for, because they're pretty high right now. But that's just what we use as an option. We've done a lot of it from both ways. This market, we start laughing off on when the bank went sideways a month and a half ago. We did 5,000 head on Monday. Last week we did 500 head for this week. It's kind of quiet this week. We usually do 1,000 to 1,500 head a week, give or take, from what's going on in the market. But we're starting to expand our footprint, to get, we think, more customers. I have more meetings with bankers than I do with producers. Every banker in the country that we talk to wants to.
We're about 3 minutes away from the agri-spray drone demonstration.
So I would tell you
about 60 yards south of the plaster center on the grass strip.
Very big
They'll talk about the drone, and you can actually see it go in the air.
Start
And
saying, hey,
do
you need
some
to call us.
spraying out
And
there.
he's
So
okay at
if you have an
$19.
interest in that, you still have
You're not
time
going
to
to lose all
get
your
out there.
equity. So we're starting to have, I had 2 in Mountain Home, Arkansas, and all the bankers in town put their head together and brought all their customers to one meeting. Where's that ever happened? All the local bankers gathered up, and they brought us about 20 guys and said, listen, we're going to sit there and talk about this thing. Then we went to Paris, where they have 60 people down there, 80 people in that meeting down in Paris, Arkansas, and there was a lot of conversation about what's going on. There's some high price here, talking about the opportunity. And whenever I told those guys that the best thing that happened was they had to pay me that $100 in insurance, they were like, Then we kind of went through the scenario. But the biggest thing is to protect your equity long term, and it's a way to do that from the bottom side. So back to you, Kevin. Thank you.
That's a great, Solved some good thinking there. I like this quote: catch up, you need to ask the right questions. To get ahead, you need to find the right answer to the right questions. But stay ahead, you need to find the right answers, the right questions, at the right time. Timing is the essence. So here's my question for you guys. What questions might you have for panelists? We've got a microphone, and we will take some audience questions now, as long as they have something to do with this topic here. We're not going to let them give you a gotcha question, right? That's right. Any questions? from the group.
Online is can you guys hear me? Online is asking a question. What is the likely trend of cow prices in the fall?
Okay, likely trend of cow prices. Skyler, we're going to put you on the spot right now. So maybe give us an update of what we saw last night at that Show Me Select sale, and then project out and tell us about what you see happening this fall.
Well, I mean, going back to what you guys covered earlier with the hay situation we got. So in this part of the world, going in from August 31st all the way through the fall last year, we didn't bale any hay. Hay supplies were tight. We had a really late spring. We're still hoping we're going to get one with the rains and warm weather. So, the last 3 weeks of Joplin, we sold 5,000 cows. We had 2,400, then we had 14, 1,500, and 1,100. So, you're still seeing big runs of cows. Fort Scott, Kansas had 1,000 cows a couple weeks ago. It's a little bit dry there. So you're still seeing a lot of cow liquidation go on across the United States. Going forward from here, everyone's always like, how many more cows can you sell? I mean, how many more of them there is there? And it just keeps surprising us too. They just keep coming out of the bushes. So, I think we're going to see these people really cull these cows really hard. I think it's 30 days from now, if we keep seeing widespread rain, across the United States, and people getting the hay fields, these cow numbers will come down. I still think there's $10 or $20 in these tall cows. Take-home cows, the markets never really get to their full potential of expansion until people keep heifers. So if we run into this fall and you see them cows start to get a lot higher, people start keeping heifers back. That'll be the next step as we go forward. But I think stock cows, and it's all weather dependent. We're gonna see these prices up 50, 60, 70% going into the fall, in my opinion, if it rains. If it don't, and it's fooled me a lot of times, it won't. They'll stay pretty well where they're at.
Brady, let me point to you. I mean, you talked about lower placement. When you tie together lower placement and summer grilling season and everything else, I mean, there's going to be some demand for cows even just throughout the summer months, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that hamburger market and other things, like I say, coming into the season. And, another thing that I think about, we always talk about the average age of producers in agriculture and all that, but I think that there's going to be a transition here as well, because a lot of guys are saying, I've got cows that are 8, 9, 10 years old, maybe they haven't sold them. I mean, they're getting younger, I think, the ones that are coming to town, but look at what they're worth and start selling them off, and I think that we'll probably end up seeing a lot of guys get out of the business, in fact, and because these prices are as high as they are. So, yeah, I mean, if the economy stays on a firm footing and the Fed pauses, say, here in the middle of June, and we get the consumer optimism and continue trade with China and maybe the dollar weakening up, I mean, I think that the consumers continue to buy. Beef has become much more available. I mean, you were talking about that as well, the consumers, but a lot of these big retailers are doing, Walmart, Kroger's, others. We've seen that in the steak market over the last couple of years. We've seen just more availability of beef in front of people, and they're consuming it. And I think that's kind of a habit, more at home and these things. So, I mean, if demand stays strong and these, what we're talking about, I think that we'll see this cow market stay pretty strong. And I still think we're probably going to have another round of liquidation coming. Like I say, weather depending, but also when you start doing the math on a 7, 8 year old cow, and some people are probably going to cash in. So,
Another question. Let me ask a couple of questions about livestock risk protection, just to clarify for the audience, right? And so number one, what I heard you say, it doesn't matter if you have 1 or 24,999. So the point is, unlike a futures contract, I can do it with 23 head if I want to. Is that right?
Yes, your biggest exposure was the premium on the right and no margin call. You don't pay it till after the fact. So, and that's we talk about that all the time. Even in late summer, the spread on those cattle gets pretty tight, because the rest of the year the index is about enough to pay a lot of the premium. Sometimes, a lot of times the index one will pay you the premium. The difference in yes, it's from 1 to 12 or 11,000 or 12,000 on a contract up to 24,900 something.
And I would just add to that. So of course, the feeder market's 50,000 pounds, and even if you buy a put, no margin call, but it's got to have 50,000 pounds. And,
Yeah.
and even if you do have 5,000 head, it's nice to have the incrementalness of the LRP. You know, I mean, I do the same thing. It's like, you know, if I get 50 head of these lean calves and I do, you know, 12 now and 12, you know, if the market goes up a little more, then do another one. And it'll be a day later, but it's all within the same time frame. But, you know, in these markets, it's hard to hit the timing. But us farmers, we're always an all or nothing, right? Like, we're going to sell them all or we're going to keep them all. And it's easy to get into that mentality, but, you know, with this volatile as these markets are, you know, with the expanded limits and how much these markets can move on a daily basis and how we see in the ground, I mean, the amount of movement now is just incredible across all markets. And, you know, being able to do those incremental so you're not just picking a date and time and you're going to be right or wrong is really a nice element of the LRP.
We're getting a lot of our guys that split in months. Well, like I say,
Yep.
looking at fall because they do half in October, half in November.
Yep.
You know, then maybe pull their heifers. We're going to hold them to see what they want to do. We're seeing them pull them back on into December for the first of the year.
So what do you say to somebody who says, this is the most bullish market in years, and you're asking me, I mean, I'm going to get a lot of money for my calves this fall one way or another. You're asking me to spend $20 or $30 or $40. I mean, what do you say to those folks that are so optimistic, to your point, who said, this is the exact wrong time to be doing this. I mean, I want to do it when I'm scared of making any money. It's just I'm going to make some money, it's just not how much. What do you say to those folks, Kevin?
That conversation is about a daily conversation every day, and I just say, you know, you're going to be back, and it's not going to be as much fun. You're going to buy it. This product is here, and it's designed for the customer. They didn't like crop insurance either when they started, but they buy it, and they'll keep working on this product until they get it where it's set. And right now it works pretty well, but I just told me you're going to be back. I know I'm as emotional as you are, and I understand. And I said, the opportunity is going to be here. And if you let $200 or $300 a head slip away, shame on you for $20.
Yeah. Or just do 20%, you know. And I didn't catch you off, but we were talking before. The hardest thing to do is trying to get somebody to buy protection when they look like they don't need it, right? It's like even like house insurance, right? I mean, if you don't think there's going to be any problem and you're going to be able to fix it all, and it's hard to do that when the market's kind of running away from it. But
Is the market harder to sell when it's going up or going down?
Yeah, that's right.
Going up.
Yep.
For me.
It is. Oh, for sure. That's what I mean. You know, trying to buy downside
When it's going
protection
down, you're like, it's coming back.
in a market.
It's going to come back.
Yeah. And then you get into 2 to 3 days of that. You know, we're
Then
going
you're
to
sad.
bottom and bounce back.
You
And
get all these emotions.
you lose another $10.
Your wife's like, what's wrong with you? I mean, I've
told
been
you
through that.
so.
Now you're talking like somebody with some experience here, Skyler. That's fantastic. Yeah.
We did probably 25,000 heads the morning in Ukraine because we had till 9 o'clock on yesterday's market to buy that market. We know it's an open limit down. You know, we had 2 people on the phone for 4 o'clock that morning to fill in. And one thing I'll tell you that's important is if I don't have a 2-page application on you now, I'm not going to help you that morning. I'm going to help the people that are already on file with us because I don't have a choice. I have to take care of the people that already have. You don't have to buy anything. It's a 2-page application that we put on file. You're ready to go. It's literally, how long does it take you, Clay, to do a contract? And 5 minutes would be a long one. It literally, we type in about 8 things and it's done. So just keep that in mind. If you think you're ever going to use this, come talk to us. We'll put a contract on file. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you is if you've already got a contract with another person, don't think you can call us that morning because you can't. You have to go back to your original guy until July 1st. We got to switch it prior to July 1st if you do want to come to us as well. But I can't help you, and I don't want you to wait for us on the phone that morning in that spot because I can't help you, and I don't want you to be in a bad spot because you got till 8:25 as of July 1st, and that's a lot to get done in the morning if something happens overnight.
That's a question, no. Any other questions here? I want to come back to you, Brady, and ask a question relative to the biggest risk. And I think the list of risks that you put up there was helpful. We spent a lot of time talking about market risk, but what do you guide all of us to say, how do we do a good, solid risk assessment on our operation? And whether it be, again, the risk that occurs if the guy that everything's in his head, gets hit by a bus, or the risk of a fire, or in our case, in 2013, a big flood, or what have you. Talk about that, then I'm going to give you an opportunity as somebody who specializes in this to do the same.
Yeah, and also I think I'm a good example because I've been through it.
Yep.
I was actually I can talk about our situation. I was living overseas, and and it was a deal where my dad passed kind of suddenly, but I was involved, up to that, even though I wasn't there, and just having that relationship of talking and everything. And by the way, that was in 2013, and I came back in 14, and my dad always ran soccer, and I wanted to do cow-calf. And so guess when I bought into the cow-calf market? 2014. So I'm still paying for that, by the way, but, sometimes we're a little more eager than, right? But no, I think that those things are important, and, even talking about succession planning and stuff like that none of us want to do, having trust and things in your trust and stuff like that. That's not necessarily my exact area, but I can just tell you, having all your information in one place and being able to have kind of a backup plan and more people that know about your operation and where things are and what you're going to do if there's an issue. But having price protection in place, of course, is really important. I mean, I work with a lot of younger guys and smaller guys as well. We were talking about that equity component, which you outlined very well. And the guys are getting started out, and sometimes that is a part of the succession planning is, your son or daughter getting involved in the operation and starting to put some things in their own name, and they need protection more than anybody. And a lot of times, in order to borrow money, they've got to have it in place. And I tell a lot of our younger guys that may not want to spend the insurance because they're trying to hit that home run, right, without having a cost. But it helps you to access more capital and to borrow more capital, and that's what a lot of us younger guys need in the market where we don't have that equity base built out. But just like I say, having a plan, and it may not be in your immediate family, but a lot of us have trusted relationship with accountants and things like that. And I don't know, I just had some of this recently happen, and it just reminds us that things can be very temporary, and it also is not necessarily someone just older, right? It can happen to any of us, and just gotta be cognizant of that.
Kevin, what would you add in terms of the whole risk assessment above and beyond market risk?
We sit down with a lot of our farmers, and it's that transition from grandpa to grandson right now. Because kind of our age group, coming out of the 90s, early 90s, there wasn't a lot of farm income for us to work with. So we kind of moved away from that. I had a job, and that was a great thing. I could still be part of agriculture in both of us, and we're still in that industry. But one of the things that we have a lot of conversations, all of our guys do with the people. Grandpas are still calling the shots. It starts. When we have a meeting and we're talking about the value of a $500 million combine. The family's got to be in that conversation. You can't just be. And I understand it's grandpa's, but we have that conversation day in and day out with our people. What's the plan? Where are you going to go next? How's it look? What are the things we need to be doing to cover, to protect you? Is that building that important? Well, no, we take it off. What's the future look like? And we walk through that with them when we make sure. One of the other things a lot of people forget to do is they create that trust you're talking about, and they don't put it on your insurance policy. And it owns everything, and it has that insurance policy has no duty to defend that because it's not a name on the policy. One of the things we spend a lot of time, we sit down or the grandson or the son, they form a little LLC over here, and they sell a little meat out of your LLC, and they don't tell us. I can't fix it after the fact. So those are just some of the risk protection things we talk about. We go through every name and third when we sit down. I ask all the details. What's going to happen? What kind of assets are we trying to protect? Grandpa wants us to buy a $500,000 liability. Well, he's got 5,000 acres are worth $5,000 an acre. We probably need to have a $10 million umbrella on there. Those are the things that we try and work with our people when we talk about their assets, what they need to protect, and what they don't. And then remind them of what happened to their neighbor who got sued down the road, or we had someone in our community have a pretty good sized lawsuit in the cattle industry. I sold more umbrellas off that umbrellas than I've tried to sell for years, but it affected him personally. It was a $10 million lawsuit. It got worked out, but the conversations were. If you're really trying to tell them this is a different world we live in. We're trying to help you. We want to make sure everything's right. We'll walk you through it, help them with it. We spend a lot of time on it.
And unfortunately, sometimes you learn the lesson the hard way after the fact when you find out that, you thought that that was not a real risk, or you had conservative risk, or what have you. I'm just in that boat. Yeah. One last question for you guys. I guess I just asked each one of you to finish up here. As we look ahead for the next 6-12 months, hopeful that there's some real optimism in this cattle business. I just asked each one of you to say, what's one or two things you'd tell all of us that we can do to try to position ourselves to fully capitalize on maybe some good times that could be ahead for the business. What do you say, Brady?
I got to go first. Huh?
I'm gonna put you on. You're right here on the right.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I'll tell you, I think that we do have a big opportunity ahead. I think that the bull cycle here in the cattle market, we talk a lot about risk, which we need to protect, but it is a time to be paying attention. And I think that we're going to see over the next 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 even, that, especially in the cow-calf market, stockers can be a little bit more difficult because you have them for a shorter window. And, we're often borrowing money to make it all work, and rates are more expensive. I think that the main thing is, break even. Know your break even. And I talked with a lot of guys in the crop business about this too. And it's like, how much money do you want to make? And we never think of it that way, but how much money do you want to make? I mean, if you can make 200-300 ahead and where you can protect it, but know where your break evens are and protect that break even. And, but I think there's a big opportunity, and it's time to position for it. So if you've got the labor and the infrastructure there to do it, make sure you get price protection in place, because it's probably going to be something outside of the cattle market that is going to be that one thing you were talking about that that we look back in hindsight and see that it was a major issue. So don't try to plan for it. And like I say, it doesn't matter how hard you work. We're all thinking that way. The harder we work, the more the outcome. But when the markets change, and they do overnight, it's not about that. So be thoughtful in terms of how you're protecting. But I think there's going to be a really good market in the next couple of years for the cattlemen. And if you're doing local beef, if you're doing beef supply chain, we talked about that. We're starting to work with a lot more guys do that. I feel like younger people as well as a part of an operation, that can be kind of a thing they are interested in and take on to kind of get them involved in the business, that there's going to be opportunities there. I wouldn't be surprised over the next 6 months if we see some shortages even in some of the beef supply here in this country again. So I've already talked to grocery stores and talked about rationing and things like that. So anyway, supply chain is going to be top of mind, and just figure out in your operation, even if it's not a traditional way that you've been capturing value in the market, to consider it.
Outstanding. Outstanding. What would you say, Kevin?
Well, I can tell you what I'm doing personally. You got to make hay like sunshine. I think you need to mash the gas. Labor's going to use things like LRPs, take advantage of some of these feed prices drop. You want to try to have as many backgrounding cattle as you can, and you want to try to have many calves on the ground. If we don't get many opportunities like this, the cattle market's nothing but a cycle. It's cycled for ever since they recorded it.
Right.
So, you want to use some things like these LRPs. You want to go to your bankers, tell them you want to try to leverage this thing and get out in front of this feed deal, get some feed bought. We're going to see a dip in this feed. Take advantage of it. Know your expenses. Know what you've done. I mean, you want to be cautiously optimistic, but not very many times do we get this chance to make some money in the cattle business. And just because cows are bringing $1 a pound, if you got an opportunity to keep them, because they're going to make you money. That's the way I feel. Great. What do you think, Kevin?
They kind of LRP piece is the biggest thing that we can help from my side of the business. Even if you want a portion of your herd or part of it or half of it, but we're even working out on some unborn calves for the fall for next spring, just proportionally. Let us protect part of that equity, because then you get to keep being part of the industry, and we all get to keep working together. So.
Haven't tried for a while. I mean, it's not, you and I were having a conversation. How many of you, do any of you take any passive forage protection insurance? I started doing that a couple years ago, and it is one of those things. My insurance agent called me here a week ago and said, look, he said, December, January, paid for your policy, and you made some money in February, March. And now I'm like, hey, anything else now can rain. You know, my policy's paid for. I just want a lot of drafts. But I recognize full well there'll come a day when he's going to call and I'm going to have to write him a check. But it's that concept of give me $100. It's give me a portion to set aside to say over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period, I'm going to use this money to manage risk. And you know, for somebody, I don't know if you believe this is risk manager. I've always believed if you're wealthy enough personally to be able to take the high highs and the low lows, then this session is not for you. Just go for it. I'm just not personally in that position. I mean, it has wrecked me. You know what I mean?
We'll trade natural gas.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's an alternative, right? That's good. At any rate, as we close up today, I just close with this comment. We do a lot of reading, and one of the great books that I read is a book by Warren Bennett, a leadership author. He said, the single most important thing leaders do is make good judgment calls in the face of ambiguity, uncertainty, and conflicting demands, often under a lot of time pressure. Leaders must make decisions and take action to ensure the survival and success of the organization. And he goes on to say it this way, good leaders sort the important from the trivial. They focus on getting the important calls right. I would tell you that I think as we talk today, one of the most important calls we can get right is to say, how are we managing the risk in our operations? And are we utilizing the tools that are at our disposal to manage that risk so that we're able to do this not just next year, but next generation? Thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to Joplin Regional Stockyards and the good folks at Special Risk Insurance for sponsoring this. We really, really appreciate your involvement in this, both in terms of financially as well as providing some expertise. And thank you, Brady, for coming and joining us today. Have a great farm show.